Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at two new HDZero products. We've got the HDZero vTx, this is the Whoop Lite vTx. You may have seen pictures of it posted online. They've got a new shape from the prototype that I showed you some many months ago. And then we've also got the new HDZero Nano camera V2, I believe. Actually, the back might even say Nano Lite. The back of the camera actually says HDZero Nano V2 Lite. So hopefully that's what I've put on the thumbnail or in the title. I think the first thing we want to know before I get this in a quad is we want to weigh it up, get its dimensions, take a little finer look, and then we'll get it in that quad. Probably one of the most important factors in these ultralight HDZero components. One is the camera. On my scale, without the backing or the screws, comes in at 1.69 grams. Oh, it just switched to 1.7. If we add the 4 screws and the camera backing, now we're up to just a touch over 2 grams. Then it's likely you'll use these 2 screws to mount the camera, and you got 2.25 grams. The board alone comes in at 4.64 grams, but the antenna I'm going to use is this ORT antenna, which comes in at 5.15 grams. So if I include the mounting screws for the camera, the mounting screws for the camera backing, as well as my antenna, we don't have any wires on here, so it's not ready to connect, but this should give you a pretty good idea of what the weight would be at almost 7.4 grams. It also should come with this little piece of adhesive, which it's not really foam tape, but it's kind of thicker than regular tape. I think this is to help secure the MIPI cable in the back of the camera. Doesn't register on my scale, but let's try it again. Oh, scale moved. 7.42 grams now. So the camera is 14 millimeters wide and just about 16 millimeters tall. From the lens of the back, looks to be 10.3 millimeters. The width of the camera lens looks to be 6.6 millimeters, but I can get different measurements depending upon how I hold the camera lens, so maybe 6.7 is safer. The distance from the center of the screw hole to the edge of the lens looks to be just about 6 millimeters. And if we include the backing, but note it doesn't sit real flush on the back there, 12.5 millimeters. Side to side on the screw holes looks like 25 millimeters, and across the board looks to be somewhere around 35.5 millimeters, which is what we'd expect in a Whoop board. While mine doesn't have the shield that you maybe have seen in the pictures online, it will come with that. If you buy one in a bind and fly, I'm told that will be at the manufacturer's discretion. Also, it will come with M2 rubber grommets for soft mounting. One of the things that sticks out right off the bat is the PCB design has changed quite a bit to where the sides are sunk in a little bit from our mounting point, and that will help us get down within the ducts for say a different frame design, or if you have a frame with thicker ducts, say you have a 2-inch Whoop that you're trying to get this down in between the ducts, that will definitely help get it down in there. That will also help keep some of the cabling out of harm's way. But do note that this connector is smaller than the original. So don't think that your original connector is going to work for firmware updating. Remember, we need this little connector for firmware updating. I can't get it super close, but it's pretty obvious that's different, and it does come with a new cable for updating the firmware on the vTx. So just make sure you keep track of this. Also, another major difference is not just how these are designed, but the fact that they're not breakouts anymore, which was one of the issues you can see here on mine. Because they are breakouts and enough crashes and impacts, I did kind of snap the board along the breakout line. With this new design, they won't have that. So that will be, I think, improve the ability to mount and reliably mount the vTx inside a traditional Whoop. Taking a closer look, we of course see the DiviMath logo on these 2 main chips up here, and then we've got ground, voltage. This would go from RX to TX, this would go from TX to RX, and then we have our smart audio pad on here. Of course, our UFL connector is over here for connecting to our antenna. And then a little bit of a look on the backside, we see the FCC ID on there as well. And it's the HDZero Whoop Lite board, which I probably should have said in the intro. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this, and I'm going to put it in that. You might remember this is one of my new favorite Whoops. This is the Mobulus 7 ELRS version. This is 1S, of course, which is what we want to test. So I'm hoping I'll just stack it in above here. But because this new frame is the V4 frame, the V3 is, I think, the one that looks more like the Ishin trash can. It looks a little bit more like this. This is the traditional Mobula frame. I had to go back to an original version because the posts are nice and tall, whereas in this new frame, which is more durable, the posts are shorter. You can see the camera mount or the camera canopy is actually lower than these posts are. And we're going to need that extra post length, but we'll see what frame developers do as the HDZero Whoop Lite vTx comes into more manufacturing hands and they start to look at designs. Maybe they'll come back out with a frame just like this, the added durability, added reliability, as well as taller posts for our HDZero installations. Let's get it in here and take it for a spin to see what that camera and transmission looks like. I'm working on putting everything together, and I caught another mistake. Now, oftentimes in my videos, when I make a goof, as I like to say, I'll leave it in the video. So, yeah, I forgot to weigh the MIPI cable. Well, it's not even actually going to be the MIPI cable that I'm holding. You're going to get a different MIPI cable. This one, I think, is the 80mm version. Depends on how you measure it. It's around 80mm. The one you'll get is 40mm, so it'll be half this length, which is good with a Whoop Lite board. Also, it will come with an ultralight antenna. I don't have a picture or anything to show you, but something else to look forward to. And this 80mm MIPI cable weighs 0.8 grams, so maybe the 40mm weighs 0.4 grams, maybe. As I have things pretty much all together here, I did miss these notches on either side of the UFL connector. Of course, that's the PCB notches. You could use that for a really thin zip tie to secure your antenna down to the UFL. That way you're not gluing to the UFL or you're not pulling on the UFL itself. Should give it more rigidity. In my particular case, I like to use welder glue, which is this stuff right here. It takes a very long time to set up, about 12 hours to cure, but it does remain kind of rubbery. I have not had any problems pulling UFL connectors off any boards using this stuff. So you can choose to use this stuff or a zip tie through the notches or whatever you want. Okay, in these next few segments, we are going to be looking at the image quality of the camera, of course, as well as the transmission of the Whoop Lite board and in my house, so you can compare that to all sorts of different quads because I fly in the same environments. I like to fly in my environment. I like to get a little flight in whenever I have a few minutes. So this is in our 4.3 format, which, you know, for me is the most comfortable, but if you like 16:9, this camera has that as well. You may want to use the YouTube Gear icon to slow down the playback if you want to get a slower sort of eye on the image quality that you see on the camera or any sort of transmission issues that you want to see or diagnose. I won't slow it down here. You can do that on your own. We're not going to look at a whole lot of continuous minutes of this stuff. We're going to chop through. I've got several different scenes, so to speak, that I think it's pertinent to show you because this camera is quite remarkable, so I've got a lot of different footage to look at. And to me, this is probably not just the lightest HDZero camera that we've seen, but it might also be the best. But I would like to hear from some of you eagle-eyed people out there. I know my vision and my eye for detail as far as camera quality isn't the best, so I'm curious to see what others think about this camera as well. In my house, I have a mixture of lighting, and as you can see outside the windows, we do have a full sunlight. So we've got some LED lights, we've got traditional house lights, whether they're bulbs, we've got some fluorescent lighting in the basement with some of those long tube lights, and then we've got LED lights that are also those long tube lights. So a lot of different lighting that we can look at and get a different sort of perspective on. But I think that's probably enough. We don't need to see a lot of all these different types of footages. Let's move into what the widescreen format looks like in the house. So same day, just, you know, a short time after I did the 4.3, we're now flying widescreen. And with all my DJI flying, I have become more comfortable flying widescreen, although it took me a while to get used to that. So if that's your thing, great, but I still think I'm better at my sort of flight style flying in the 4.3 or traditional square sort of format. Widescreen is nice and enjoyable if you're watching a particular scene, but for me, yeah, flying, I still need 4.3, and I got pretty speedy going down those stairs, so I had to arrest my speed going around the table down there. But again, we're getting a chance to see all the different lighting within the house, the color schemes, the shapes, the sizes, the transmission that we've got through the house as well. And you can see on this battery that we're already getting down to 3.5 volts. The battery was not fully charged, or I had started a run before that. One of the things that I would like to see improved, and I'm not sure if it's a Betaflight issue or where the issue lies, is that when we arm and disarm, the fly time resets. Whereas in analog, that fly time is consistent, so you can actually disarm and rearm, and the fly time will just pick back up from where you left off. But running this display port that we get for OSD and HDZero, we don't get that. So if your flight's not continuous, you don't see an actual fly time, you just see the fly time between your last arm and disarm. That's a good section of the widescreen format. We're not going to look at widescreen too much, though. My focus is going to be on 4.3. Jumping outside, and thankfully we got a nice day. The winds are relatively calm, 10 to 12 miles an hour. I don't have any flight audio for this section. The neighbor girls are outside, and they're saying some names, and I don't know who those people are. But you know, it's just, I don't want to spread their business, whatever it might be. They're young kids, so I'm sure it was all innocent, but I wasn't listening real closely while I was flying. I just noticed during this segment that there were some names being said over there, and they weren't so much talking about each other, so it was somebody that may have been joining them that doesn't live with them because they're back in their pool area using their pool and having a good time. So no flight audio on this one. Of course, the pool is coming along ever so slightly. Everybody likes to talk about conformal coating, that I'm going to be putting all sorts of tutorials about conformal coating. Here we're going to fly around the front side of the house. Remember, I'm sitting in the back side of the house. I've got a brick face house, and I think at 200 milliwatts, which is what this is running, it's kind of remarkable. I have got analog vTxs that I've had on the channel, and I've done that same pass that I don't think are nearly as good. I'm thinking of the Foxeer Reaper at 350 milliwatts. The OVX is at 300, and it did pretty good. I would say it's similar. So when it comes to watt for watt, I still think HDZero is better, or because the image quality in the camera is so much better and the way it breaks up is so less dramatic that it feels better when you're flying through it. It's much less challenging to fly through the breakup when you do have it than it is for analog. And in my opinion, that's a good thing. Whether it's just more better transmission, or if it's just the visual of the transmission breakup being able to see through it, or the image quality making it seem like less. Fly by the little pumping equipment over there. I'm wondering if having this big water body in the backyard is actually going to affect the vTx transmission. I wouldn't think so, but you know, I haven't flown around a lot of water, so I don't think I could really speculate on that too much. But we got ourselves a couple of minutes of the 4.3 outside full sun brightness, and now we're going to land, and then we're going to take a look at the camera settings. So we've got brightness, sharpness, contrast, saturation, WB mode, WB red, blue. We can flip the camera. We have max gain, which we can turn on and off, and the aspect ratio, of course, 4:3 and 6:9. Of course, if we hose the settings and we want to reset, exit. But the settings that you see that I have it set on camera here, that should be the settings that you get the camera in. Of course, this is early production runs, so I had to set these manually. You should not have to do that. These were settings that I got from Ryan, and he said these should be the default settings. So if you like the image quality that you're seeing in my videos, presumably you won't need to change those settings when you get your camera. When you do change your aspect ratio, you do have to repower your VRX, so the module on your goggles, which I know a lot of people are looking to get and are having that patient pants problem where we just have to wait for manufacturing to catch up. Okay, let's move on to our next scene, which is widescreen, of course. Now, to me, this looks like it doesn't look stretched, because nothing looks unusual as far as shape and sizes go, but it looks like it's spread across the screen. I can't think of the right verbiage to determine it. It just looks less sharp than it does 4.3. Of course, that makes sense, because in 4.3, the entire image is smaller, so it should appear more crisp versus a wider sort of 16:9 view where it's spread across the screen. But again, it's an option that if you like 16:9, it's there for you, which in the other cameras, when it came to micro cameras, that was a close call right there. I had a feeling when I clipped that little bush that I might spin into the pool. So I held on to the throttle. Don't go down, don't go down, don't go down. Made it through there anyways. So we didn't oftentimes in cameras, you know, less than 5 or 6 grams, see the ability to adjust not just camera settings, but also aspect ratios. So I think that's another aspect of this camera that's pretty remarkable in that we have all the different camera settings that we can change. We have the different aspect ratios, and we have a super light camera with a really small lens. I certainly didn't expect a super small lens to produce the image quality that I was observing. Of course, in the goggles, it looks better than it does in DVR. That's pretty much always the case. Even in analog, it looks better in the DVR, in the goggles, than it does in the DVR. That's just something that we have to live with in this hobby, I guess. So we're going to make another pass in the widescreen format around the house. Pretty much the same path I made last time, but I go a little bit quicker, just kind of my nature of wanting to always push that nose down and get around. Very, 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 very flyable. Again, really good transmission in my opinion. I've flown around the house, around the front of the house many times on videos here on the channel, and outside of anything that's super powerful, you know, 600 plus milliwatts, I think this HDZero is very comparable to what I would see in, say, a 500 milliwatt vTx. Maybe even better in some cases, depending upon what you're looking for. You can also go back and look at the video that I just published where I did some Express LRS testing with the flat antenna and the Beta FPV, where I am flying the TBS Unify Pro 32 Nano. And of course, I don't fly that direct path right in front of the house, but you can kind of compare some breakup that you see on that 500 milliwatt vTx versus this 200 milliwatt HDZero. And I think the HDZero one does better, but I don't stretch it as hard in this video. That's kind of not necessarily a reasonable test to be flying around 2 houses clear across the cul-de-sac. But that's a widescreen look at on that same day. Super sunny, nice low winds for whoop flying. Okay, so we're back to widescreen and we're back inside the house, but this is about a low voltage test. So this is a flight where I flew it to failure as far as the vTx and camera receiving power. And you can see we're already down below 3 volts, and we get just below 2.8 volts and the video dies. Now let's go back to the last frame, and we can see where I actually had a full image at 2.77 volts, so just under 2.8 volts. And then this next frame, we're pretty much losing the vTx signal, and we're going to that rainbow that we oftentimes call it at 2.75. But you can see at the very top there is a little bit of the image still left, but I think that's pretty much the last possible frame that we're going to get out of it. But wait, I have my Steve Jobs moment here yet. Yeah, we're going to do some LED gate flying now. So most of the lights in the basement are off. I have the lights kind of in the back area. You'll see them. We'll fly through there. But I have my We Bleed FPV gates out, and I have our Mobility gates out as well. I will link those 2 websites down below. They both have gates. I get a lot of questions about gates. I think gates are fun. They're fun to set up. Not only are they nice to look at, but they give us a different sort of aspect to our flying, especially inside a small space. And many times people will ask me about, you know, oh, it'd sure be nice to have a nice big house like yours to fly in. Well, when I'm flying at nighttime, I don't leave the basement. So that would be, you know, 900 or less square feet. So you don't have to have a huge place to be able to enjoy some whoop fun, especially with gates. Of course, it helps. It makes it more interesting. I won't deny that. I think the flow through the house is probably even more important than the actual raw square footage. But I did want to show you some of this night flying, so to speak, inside the house with LED gates, because some of you might be interested in going to a whoop race where there are LED gates, so now you have a pretty good idea of how they'll look. And we have the transitions from my downstairs lighting in the unfinished part of the basement through the dark part of the basement with those LED gates. Another perspective, and there is even more. Okay, so this is pretty windy, and this is what I would call pretty much dusk for us around here at this time of year. The sun is pretty low, so I wanted to give you a segment of looking at that. Many people fly whoops outside. I tend to fly them outside only for review purposes. Otherwise, I fly them inside. Yeah, it's pretty windy, so we're going to have some shakes and some wobbles. It is a whoop. It is 1S that I'm flying. By the way, I should mention that this vTx supports more than 1S, supports 1 to 3S. You can go more than that, but I'm not going to talk about that much more because I can't advise that. I just think if you're going to want to fly more than 3S, you probably need to move to one of the different vTxs that HDZero has been producing. I guess that's the best way I can think of putting that. But as we breach the top of the house and we can see where the sun position is, and then we dive back down into the pool backyard area. And that is coming along. We got another cement pour that I think is going to happen tomorrow. We had to have an inspection on some footings that were dug out for some piers to support the outdoor living space roof. And so that got taken care of. The inspector is supposed to be back tomorrow between 9 and 11. And then I'm hoping the concrete guys are kind of earmarking tomorrow afternoon to pour the outdoor living space area. And then the last cement pour is going to be the extra driveway space along the side of the house where the garbage cans are. That will be kind of a walkway for people that might be coming to join us for an outdoor event or something of that nature. So hopefully we're getting close, maybe just a week or two out. I suspect the outdoor living space has got another 30 days of construction because it's going to have electrical and, we've got to build a roof, got to extend the roof line, guttering. There's an outdoor cooking space, but we're just going to use canned propane out there. So we've got a grill that should be showing up pretty soon, along with some other cooking outdoor kitchen items shortly. So it's slowly taking shape, but I know the kids and my wife and myself, I'm excited too to be able to get into the pool and enjoy some nice cool water, although the pool is heated as well during the warmer months here. Hopefully keep us together and have a little bit of a time to where we're, instead of rushing around town going to all the activities, that we're actually spending time together and in our new sort of outdoor fun area. But wait, one more time. There's more. Yeah, I'm going to fly this thing at night. Out in front of my house at night. This thing, remember that lens. It's tiny. It's minuscule. Also keep in mind, my neighborhood does not have street lights. We are just using house lights. Matter of fact, most of the neighbors don't even have their house lights on. So some of the neighbors do, some of the neighbors don't. Those orange house lights that we have over at my neighbors here, they swap those out at about Halloween time. And so they're kind of an ominous sort of orange, and they kind of lowly flicker. Of course, the light from our garage is shining out, but we don't have our porch lights on or anything. It's just landscape lighting. A few of my neighbors across the way, kind of up the street a touch, have some really nice lighting, and we'll go over there, and you get to see how the camera image performs in complete darkness, but with a nice amount of bright light. So very, very flyable. And quite remarkable. This surprised me. I fully expected to do the walk around test with this one, and when I got outside, and I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna fly this. I'm gonna see what it's like. Get over in some of these really dark areas. These dark areas where if you're walking, you got to be careful what you're stepping on, because if there's something on the sidewalk, you might not see it in some of those darker spots because it's really dark." Again, if you follow the channel, you know I've done a bunch of different camera reviews, and you've seen this space in different sorts of seasons with different lighting from our neighbors. We actually had a camera review, I think it was over Christmas time. I can't remember if it was an HDZero camera or what camera it was, but if you want to go back and compare it to other cameras at nighttime in this neighborhood, pretty easy to do. But this was an unexpected result, at least for me. I really didn't expect, with such a small lens, that we would be able to get enough light on the sensor and the lens to really have a flyable image at all. I only get a little bit uneasy when it gets super dark. So I think to be safe, yeah, you probably need to have some light. If you're in a parking lot, or if you're in some sort of scene where they have reasonable amounts of light and it's not just complete total pitch blackness like we do have in some segments of our neighborhood, or if you just have a traditionally street lit street, it would probably be fine as well, because the city street lights are actually quite bright these days with those LED lights that they put out. So I think under a street light, it would be very, very flyable as well. But even in these dark sections, I can see those trees. I can't see them clearly, but I can see the outlines, and I know they're there. So yeah, I was, as I've said several times, I did not expect this to be flyable at night. A couple of final notes now that we've seen all the footage and you might be looking at your future builds. I did order some longer screws off of eBay. These screws here on the post, you should get M1.4, and these that I have are 8mm, and it does feel quite solid. But I also ordered, but don't have yet, some 10mm ones. Again, from eBay, I just search M1.4, 8mm, and 10mm on eBay, but I got the 8mm ones because they were available here in the US, but the 10mm ones I believe are coming from China. Also, the canopy, I've really routed out a lot of that, and you'll notice in the flight footage that still the bottom corners do appear in the flight footage, and you can kind of see my camera angle. That's more camera angle than some might use, and I think one of the things that we could do in the immediate or short run would be to take our soldering iron or a little drill bit and maybe put the screw hole right about here to move the camera up and forward just a touch. I don't think that will allow us not to ream the canopy out at all because that lens is very short. Remember, I have that distance from the screw hole to the edge of the lens. That should be helpful if you're designing a TPU print, but if you have something like this, maybe putting it right up at about this area might be helpful in order to get the camera more up off the board, because as you can see, my camera is on the board, and then forward to maybe be able to clear the canopy a little bit better without having to ream it out. And for comparison, you can see this is the typical or the stock default canopy and how much I took out of this canopy over here. That should help you get a better understanding. You can also tell from the angle, hopefully here, the difference between the RunCam Nano camera that's in the Mobula 7 ELRS versus this camera, and how it's just more shallow and the mounting is different. So you have to, and in this hobby, you have to do a little bit of modification to make things work for us. Also, I ended up not using this board because I had two of these, but I ended up not using that board because I was trying to get the smart audio wire connected, which would go right here, and I ended up killing my original board that I'd planned to use. I think I got my soldering iron too close to a cap and I damaged it. Then the board died, so I moved to a different board which actually has an onboard vTx, but I didn't find a mechanism or a jumper or solder on this board in order to disable the vTx, so I left the antenna connected and just kind of routed it here out of my way. So obviously this build isn't ideal. I've got additional build plans for one of these, probably using a different board. I might even go to the JHE MCU, but that has solder wires for the motors, so I would have to make a little bit of more work there to get everything connected up, but there's a benefit in weight as well. This is an Express LRS board, and I've used this before, but I ordered two more to use them again, just to gain some more experience with those. But that's really the only thing that I would draw your concerns about, is the camera and the mounting of the canopy. That you will need to use this frame that has the longer post, which I believe is the V2. The V4, the posts just aren't as long, so we might need to see some adaptation from Happy Model on their frames, or whoever makes their Whoop frame. At this time, I don't have like a release date to when you'll find it in your FPV shops to order. If between the time I started recording this video and when I got the editing done and published, there do become some listings, I will put them down in the video description for your easy use. Of course, you can always use your Google Foo and just type for the HDZero Nano V2 Lite camera and Whoop Lite board, and maybe you'll find various listings: AliExpress, Banggood, eBay. Who knows where you might find it using your Google Foo, or you can just hit up your local FPV shop and ask them when they expect to get a shipment. I think they're ready to go on the Whoop board. I'm not certain about the lens on the camera, but the camera I think is basically ready. I think the camera with this lens looks really good, so I think they should probably just ship it and get it out to people's hands for all of your enjoyment. Again, with these things and our manufacturing difficulties worldwide with all sorts of stuff from refrigerators to cars, if you see it listed and you have the desire to purchase, probably better order it if you have the money right away. Otherwise, you might have to wait a good long while. If it's pre-order, that might be a good idea too. Of course, you need to eat and keep the lights on, so balance your budget and desire as best you can. Hopefully I've been able to answer all the questions you might have about this, but if not, please let me know in the comment section below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.